The General Assembly couldn't reach a budget agreement, and Governor Rauner hits the trail. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state government, sometimes the federal government, and how it just might affect your life. Boy, our lives being affected these days. The General Assembly finished their planned session last week without a budget agreement. And here to talk about it today, I've got a couple of people who are wonderfully knowledgeable in this area. Kent Redfield is back. He is a professor emeritus political science, University of Illinois Springfield. Kent, welcome.
Good to be here.
And Chris Mooney, the big dog, director of the Institute of Government and Public Affairs for the University of Illinois in general. Yeah. Now living in Chicago, formerly of Springfield.
That's right.
Welcome back, Chris. Okay. No budget agreement. The governor on the last planned day of session, the last day they can pass things with a simple majority vote was last Tuesday. The governor meets with Republican legislators behind him on a grand staircase in the State House. Starts out by saying that the majority Democrats have had a stunning failure. He said it twice, and then went on for about 20 minutes saying things like that by not reaching a budget, which they still had several hours to do, but it was clear they probably would not. Where does this leave us, Chris?
Well, pretty much the same place we sat about 15 months ago, except that the social fabric, the governmental fabric has been frayed over that period of time through not only the lack of funding for various things or funding in weird ways or spending more than we're taking in, so every day we get deeper and deeper into debt. But also, I think a lot of continued worry and anxiety among people around the state who get services from the state, which is virtually everybody, and also businesses thinking about expanding, thinking about moving here. Uncertainty, anxiety is something that businesses don't want. And
I would say students planning on going to college somewhere.
They're looking at Kentucky, they're looking at Indiana. It's a sad situation.
Yeah. Kent, your thoughts?
And, if the General Assembly had a stunning failure, then the governor had a stunning flip-flop, because the governor had said, turn around or bust, we got to have these pro-business reforms. And then, he comes in on the last day of the scheduled spring session, and now we're talking about a temporary, a bridge budget, and
to last through like the end of the year, 6 months,
or past the election, and a clean school funding bill. So all of a sudden, we're now talking about temporary short-term fix, kick the can down the road, all of the things that he ran against when he was running against Pat Quinn. We're at that point. And as Chris says, we're, in addition to being much worse off in those specific, human kinds of terms, we're also about $12 billion in debt. And so when the governor says, well, here's my bridge proposal and this is all paid for, well, if you're $12 billion, you've got $12 billion of unpaid bills.
Right, that are months behind.
Nothing's paid for. You can't afford anything. And so we're really talking about, accounting things and semantics here in terms of where we're at.
Well, at 11 o'clock on the last night of the session, Senate President John Cullerton met with the press. They had about an hour to go in the session, and he had just days before, like late the week before, suggested that they weren't going to be, they didn't like what the House had passed, which was, as the governor had said, $7 billion more in spending than they expected to take in. But it was what Democrats in the House said, we'll pass all this stuff so there'll be authority to spend money if we need it. So then President Cullerton said, let's do something short term. Let's get us through this, use some existing funds. Governor's people rejected it out of hand. But then Tuesday morning, when word hit, and I guess, at least I guess the Tribune or somebody got the message the night before that the governor was proposing short-term spending, President Cullerton didn't know about it until he read it somewhere else. I mean, they didn't, he said, I asked them to put me on the email list, so they didn't even let him know that. But then they're demanding that the Democrats pass something in one day, in less than one day, when the rules are you take 3 days, and clearly things can get rammed through, and the governor and his people were terribly critical of the Madigan budget that had passed days earlier because it was 500 pages long and they just had a couple hours. Well, I saw our friend Rich Miller in Capitol Facts counted up, and I guess the two bills the governor wanted the Democrats to pass in one day was more than 1,000 pages. So what we're left with is general acrimony, and I will say President Cullerton did say, I think we can work something out within a week. But what does it mean that the Senate ended up voting on the bill that had been passed by the House and gave it only, what was it, 17 votes, I think,
yes.
and when they need 30 to pass in the Senate. And then the Senate passed a bill that would give $900 million new dollars to education. 475 million of those would go to Chicago because there's a lot of people from Chicago there, and they say that the poverty and the 400,000 students in that system need it. They passed that late on Tuesday, sent it to the House, where it got, I think, 34 votes when it needed 60. So each of the houses, dominated by Democrats, voted down a late proposal from the other side, and the governor got nothing of what he wanted. So where are we?
Well,
what does that show? Does that show the dissonance between kind of the Speaker Madigan faction and the John Cullerton faction, or is there a prettier way to say that?
No, I think clearly there have been a number of times in the past where the House has essentially passed something, sent it over to the Senate, and left town and said,
Right.
Take it or leave it. And there's a lot of animosity, I think, among Democratic senators about kind of this House and particularly the Speaker treating them as kind of the junior partners in this process. And so that was clearly on display. But it's also clear that while it is, now we're talking about short-term fix and getting through the election and funding education, the Democrats really don't know, they can't agree among themselves what's the proper play. How do we go about this strategically, which is, can we get more than what the governor's offering now that he's put something different on the table? But there's also big disagreements among the Democrats about how much more money for school and where it will go. I mean, disagreements with the governor, disagreements with Republicans, but there's not unanimity among Democrats about how you should change the funding formula. And so those regional differences, I mean, while the governor is out there flaming them, and that's not good, we shouldn't pretend that they're not there, that how you treat Chicago, how you treat downstate, how you deal with poverty. More money for schools is great, but you want to see what the formula looks like, and there's no consensus on that.
Right, yeah. Chris, the governor, the day after the night before, after that late
Sounds like a rom-com
midnight
title.
thing, he went to, I think it was 5 stops the next day in downstate communities, basically saying, sometimes in state facilities, as AFSCME pointed out, let's not just give money to Speaker Madigan and the Chicago Democratic machine, vote in good people around here, which I know you're not supposed to campaign on state facilities. We'll see if he gets in trouble. But smart move, bad move. It reminds me a little bit of about a year ago when we didn't have a budget and who thought it would go another 11 or 12 months, and the governor, attacked Speaker Madigan, President Cullerton on the lawn of the executive mansion, talked about their property tax businesses. They make money from your property taxes because their law firms help reduce tax assessments of big buildings in Chicago. Kind of a direct insult. And then there was like $1 million ad campaign against Speaker Madigan. Well, now he's doing the same kind of campaign right now and asking them to make a deal. Is this smart? Will it work?
Well, I have no idea. I mean, the governor's trying everything he can. I think a crucial part of what he's done, including the press conference on the steps at the end of the night or the beginning of the night on Tuesday, as well as is he's trying to tell his story. He's trying to say, this is what's going on around here. What's going on around here is the Democrats are trying to rob you. They're trying to steal money for Chicago. They're screwing up. I'm doing what I can to help you out. The Democrats, of course, are going to have their own story, which is this governor's unreasonable. He's trying to smash the unions. It's the war on the middle class, and we're doing everything we can to keep it up. And it's his failure to come to the table and compromise. The situation the governor finds himself in is really a double-edged sword. Number one, I mean, mainly because he has got the bully pulpit. He's the one that you guys, the press, will, any place he goes, especially in a small, he goes to Mohammed, he goes to Collinsville or whatever, he's going to be well covered. And it's easier for him to get his message out. Because if he doesn't do that, the other side of having the bully pulpit and being the figurehead and the lightning rod for public attention is that he is the stunning failure. He is responsible for everything that goes on in state government. He's daddy. He should take care of things, and so he's got to get ahead of that message before people think the other thing. Will it work? I don't know. Going around to small towns and downstate, it's not going to sway a lot of voters, but he may be targeting very specific races in the House.
Well, he clearly has said, and he said at a recent, it was only a few weeks ago or a couple weeks ago that the Republican State Convention was held in Peoria, and he gave a pretty fiery speech there. We're going to have the biggest ground game that the Republicans have seen, and we're going to gain seats and take seats from the Madigan machine and all of this, and got a lot of cheers and that kind of thing. And then the next day he had a press conference at his office saying, we really need to work together with the Democrats. Why won't they come and talk to us? That kind of thing. And that's kind of where we're at in the political / real world. Of course, from the Democrats' perspective, it's the governor who has said all along he wanted the 5% tax to drop back to 3.5% in his first year, which it did, because that was an automatic drop off of the state income tax, created somewhat of a several billion-dollar hole in the budget. That's all kept growing. And he'll say, I'll agree to a tax increase, but only with my turnaround changes, eroding some collective bargaining rights, allowing local governments, particularly now, to not use prevailing wage on projects, not pay it if they don't want, not collectively bargain on many issues if they don't want. And the Democrats are like, that hurts the middle class, and that's where we're at. So we have this impasse. Now the governor says now, for the short-term fix, the turnaround agenda items are off the table. But so is a tax increase. We're just going to use money that's in various funds that we have. So is that fixing anything or not?
Well,
he still says no tax increase without reform. I'm a Republican. I hate taxes, but I will agree to taxes, but only with reform. And these are the reforms the Democrats say go against their core values. So we have an epic struggle, as Speaker Madigan talks about.
Yeah. No, I mean, the reason we're here, if you look at what the Bureau of the Budget put out, or the Office of Management and Budget, what are we doing in terms of 2016? Well, we need to pay for utilities and water and power and food for prisons, mental health facilities, veterans homes. We need money for postage so the Department of Revenue can send out bills to collect taxes. I mean, that's where so the governor was betting that the Democrats would cave before the state imploded from the fact that it has no operating budget. We're paying state employees, but we don't have any money for operations, for things like stamps.
Yeah.
And so what we're talking about now is kind of these fixes, drawing on some funds, draining down the rainy day fund, so we can get through November, December. But we're also, as we kick that can down the road, we're still paying all of these providers, making all of these payments under court order, under consent decrees. So we're adding, if the numbers are right, if you just extrapolate, another $3 billion worth of debt. We're willing to go into debt another $3 billion to get past the election.
Well, and the legislature also, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure they passed a bill that would fund a lot of the social service agencies backfill, keep some doors open, but the governor has said, that's what he already was saying, I want a short-term fix, so he hasn't acted on that bill as we record this program.
They're both,
so he could do that.
Yeah, anybody that says, well, we're fixing this is not, if we're not doing something about either cutting expenses or fully funding the consent decrees, then, we're just running the credit card.
Yeah, well, we'll see where it goes, because if ever there will be a tax increase, again, what President Cullerton, Democratic leader of the Senate, president of the Senate, said, if there's going to be a tax increase, it's going to be what the governor wants at the level he wants, because we're not going to do it alone. And of course, the governor always dares them, well, the Democrats have the supermajority. Let them just pass it if they want to just spend money, and let them override it, which they've proven they can't do because there's not enough members in the House who will stick together, even though they have the bare minimum 71, but they don't always get 71 votes when they need them. Well, let's talk about a little good news. It looks like the State Museum, which has been closed in Springfield for several months, might open in July if the Rauner administration has agreed. They're trying a couple of ways through legislation and through rules to say we can charge adults $5 to get in, we can reopen in July, or we might fear losing accreditation. So how's that? Has it saved any money, or has it just been for show?
No, I mean, they put that out there, we're going to close the State Museum, never assuming that they would actually have to do it. And then they had to do it because nothing got solved. And so we have taken that facility and decimated in terms of professional staff, in terms of
the director
researchers.
left, many people retired or
and
went to other jobs.
Now we have to rebuild it, and if it loses its accreditation, it makes it even more difficult to rebuild it. And so this is kind of, we're gonna open it. We won't be able to have anywhere near the quality of what it was before, but we're gonna keep it open, and then assuming that when we finally get a grand bargain and finally get enough revenue, then we'll be able to start, undoing some of the damage.
Yeah, and this is a really good example. I'm thinking small. This is what's going on throughout the state, and especially in various social service agencies and in universities, is that they're as I said before, they're afraid. They're getting weak. They're losing people. Their infrastructure is starting to fall apart. And so when this gets solved, and it will get solved at some point, whether it's tomorrow, next month, or 3 years from now, it will get solved. At that time, the damage will have been so severe, especially as we go on further, that these major institutions in the state that the state counts on are going to be damaged in the long term. It's going to take years, decades to recuperate from them, if we ever do. And this is one of the things. I mean, when he said, "I'm going to shut down the museum," and this maybe that would bring people to the table. Typically what governors do in situations that they don't shut down the state museum that a few people like, they shut down the state. They'll shut down the state parks on 4th of July weekend. They'll do things that are very severe that people notice, and that will bring people to the bargaining table, like getting, but the governor last year went out of his way to avoid that. It was a strategic move on his part, and for what ends, I'm not sure. But
well, he keeps thinking there are pressure points. Now,
he's taken away the pressure points. That's it.
Yeah. Clearly, the governor wants a clean education funding bill. President Culler was talking about one. Give me more money. See, last year, what happened is the Democrats passed many appropriations. They didn't pass enough tax revenue. Nothing to raise the taxes because they were waiting to negotiate with the governor, but then the governor wouldn't do that without the reforms he wants, so he vetoed everything except the school budget, K through 12, to keep schools operating so that people all over. But now, do we think the Democrats will give him a schools budget, if anything?
I think both sides are terribly afraid of facing the November election with schools closed. I mean, and so nobody wants to risk what the fallout.
Then will be throw the bums out, no matter
who would get blamed for that. And so they're definitely afraid of not funding, of being blamed for the schools not opening. Yeah. But the real question is, how much money and how are you going to distribute it? The Chicago schools have terrible problems. There's no question about that. In Illinois, because about 60% of your tax bill, your property tax bill, goes to schools, goes to elementary and secondary. We are in the top or bottom, however you want to. There are only a handful of states, 2 or 3, 4, that are more reliant on property taxes to fund schools than is Illinois, and so there's huge pressure. This is why we're talking about property tax freeze. This is why we're talking about, got to open the schools. And now everybody is trying to say, well, certainly, because people want it, then what can I bargain for? How can I make them blink? And so we're probably going to have a game of chicken over the next 30
and I should
days.
say there was a big argument between Mayor Rahm Emanuel of Chicago and the governor, because the governor took a year to veto a bill that would allow Chicago to pay pensions to their teacher or to their police and fire, is it, or at a slower pace, and save like $300 million a year. And the governor vetoed it, and the mayor of Chicago insulted him. And then a few Democrats, Republicans, joined Democrats in the legislature to override the governor, which has been very rare, but it happened, and so that solved one problem. Chris, I know you study states in general. out of bounds is what Illinois is doing now. How weird is it to have a state that's gone a year without a budget?
Well, it's completely unprecedented, and I've been all along this year. I've been trying to figure that out exactly. Okay, it's trying to talk to the people at the national conference. State legislatures are really good at tracking these kind of things. They have no recollection of it, and I had just happened to be at a conference the other week where somebody was a political science paper. It had nothing to do with this, but they were using the budget stalemates and overtime as an indicator for gridlock.
Yeah.
Okay, a good one for that. And they had a data set that went sort of from 2008, I think, back to 1978, and the maximum way out on this tail was 296 days, and this was in Kentucky in 2001 or something. And I was able to say, as we are sitting here, Illinois is in 333 days at that point, or whatever it was. And so, we are in completely uncharted territory. Nobody knows how to go and do a second fiscal year without having passed a budget for the previous fiscal year, other than ones that do biennium budgets. It's just mind-boggling.
Okay. Speaking back to a little bad news, late in the week, Exelon announced that they were unsuccessful in a big rally they had with a lot of their employees who came down and filled the rotunda at least one day, and probably more, and were lobbying for some tax breaks. They say that they've been losing money on some nuclear power plants, and they now plan to start the process of closing the Clinton nuclear power plant and one in Cordova, which I guess is by the Quad Cities. And it's about 1,500 jobs, but it's in the billions as far as economic impact. Thoughts on this? Obviously, are they going to give the legislature a chance to give them another tax break? There have been some mixed messages from the governor. If it's, we don't want to keep people here with necessarily tax breaks, but we got to do something to keep them here.
Yeah, that's a classic trade-off between a specific set of jobs in a particular communities and the fact that tax breaks, incentives like this are not very effective. All you do is get a bidding war going on. And then we've got the larger context of how rapidly the whole picture is changing on energy. Yeah. And so you've got some very old nuclear plants that may not be that efficient. The fracking and natural...
You're making me feel old because I covered all the Illinois Commerce Commission hearings when they were building the Clinton plant.
Well, you are
25 years ago.
face it.
So, we've got natural gas has changed the whole pricing in terms of coal. We still have coal-fired plants in Illinois.
Right, and in fact, a pretty new one in Springfield.
Yeah, and they're going to be
scrubbers.
Yeah, they're going to be under pressure because
if Mr. Trump wins, we're going to bring back coal. I'm told.
No, but if nobody will buy your coal, and if you can mine coal now with 10% of the workforce you used to mine coal, nobody's bringing back coal jobs. I mean, it just and so there's a reality out there, and a lot of uncertainty in the energy picture in terms of exactly what are going to be the sources.
Yeah.
A lot of the opposition to this comes from alternative sources, wind and solar, who accuse the big producers and distributors of not being friendly or being very unfriendly.
Right, but Exelon says we're carbon free, so give us that kind of tax break. The Attorney General, Lisa Madigan, Speaker's daughter, says you're a profitable company, let's not give big tax breaks to you at this time. So we will see where that one goes. Chris, Frank Martino, former legislator, his father was a legislator. He was easily named the state's Auditor General, but now there is a federal investigation into his campaign funds from when he was a legislator, and something like 20 lawmakers have asked for him to step aside. I haven't heard at this time as we talk here if he's doing that. How bad a situation is this for the state, or is it just uncomfortable until we hear more?
Well, you don't know really what the results of the investigation will be. You have to note that the lawmakers calling for his resignation, or whatever they're calling for, were Republicans, except for one Democratic senator who was appointed up in the suburbs. But it is unfortunate because the Auditor General is an office that is new with the new Constitution 45 years ago, and has had a scrupulous reputation. The incumbents in that job up to this point have been fantastic. Bill Holland did it for 25 years, and was the first guy to stand up to Blagojevich. And
Yeah, and we should say that what Martino was, the questions are
Yeah, you
about
don't know.
how he spent campaign funds, like a couple $100,000 at one gas station, which seemed like a lot, and people are and
maybe as a
round
Hummer.
numbers and stuff like that, and we just don't know. So we'll see where it goes. Something else that did come out of the so we'll see how that is. Something that came out of the legislature. And the governor might go along with this to decriminalize some small amounts of marijuana and also to allow medical marijuana for terminal illness and PTSD. We'll see how that goes. He's indicated possibly that he's okay with this, but we don't know yet.
I think there's an agreement there. There's an assumption in the legislature among the sponsors, certainly Representative Lang, that it will pass. And this is a sign of the huge cultural shift that's going on across America in terms of marijuana. And so it's about how big is your program going, medical marijuana, how big is your program going to be, what's going to be covered, not whether you should have one. And lots of people look at this and say, this is, you lay the foundation for decriminalization ultimately.
Yeah, or potential legalization. Look at the tax revenue. We need some tax revenue.
Well, there have been some Illinois lawmakers who have even stood up in a press conference and said we should be legalizing and make the revenue. There was also something passed. I don't know how this will do with the governor to make voter registration much easier when you renew your driver's license. Kent, I think you're up on that one.
Yeah, and I don't know what we've changed it right at the last. I don't know when the effective date is this, but essentially
I think it went to 18 or something.
Yeah.
I think it's down the road some.
Yeah, but it is an opt-out. So right now, if you go get your driver's license renewed, they'll say, would you like to register? Now, it's basically...
They'll register unless you say no.
They'll register unless you say no. It also includes human services, healthcare and family services, employment security, and aging. Lots of people don't have driver's licenses. And so the potential here is there are two... At least Oregon, and a couple of 3 states that do it.
Okay.
Attention is dramatically increased the number of
And
registered
Republicans
voters.
may be worried about who's going to sign up. Kent Redfield, thank you. Chris Mooney, thank you. Sorry we got to end it. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.